DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into Bills Weekly here on FingerLakes1.com. I am Paul Russo, and unlike certain other people in the draft, I won't be prank calling or leaving them in the green room. Jim Sinicropi, Kyle Evans here with me. As always, as I alluded to, the NFL draft was last weekend now, or well, a few days ago last weekend, whatever. And the Buffalo Bills had number of picks, address some needs, so we're going to recap and review those picks, what else they might need here as we move to the spring workout and camp season, and look ahead a little bit further here amongst some other things. But first, thank a couple more of our sponsors here at FingerLakes1.com, including GoNet Speed. The future of the connection is here, and it's fiber. May probably live and work today. GoNet Speed fiber is faster and stronger than anything out there. You can check availability in your area as well as plans and pricing at GoNetSpeed.com. Get ready for fast and reliable fiber internet straight to your home. And Cicino's Pizzeria and Restaurant. You can visit Cicino's Pizzeria and Restaurant at their original Waterloo location or all new renovated location in Geneva. Dine-in, takeout, delivery, catering, and banquets. You can order online at Cicinos.com. Live, laugh, and eat well. It's the Italian way. Now, I went to the Geneva location last night after I got done driving a Seneca 7 team yesterday, and that pizza hit like the absolute best thing on the planet after 12 hours in a van. So
yeah, the Geneva location's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Shout out to them. They also had the white garlic pizza, one of my low-key favorite slices out there, or pies in general, to be fair. So great stuff. All right, guys. NFL draft, it's always an interesting time of year when we get to this point. Not to say the football in general kind of gets put on the back burner, but we get to spring, there's a lot of focus on those winter sports as they're in the playoffs, baseball starts. But for a few days, the NFL kind of comes back to that front burner, and we get 3 days of pretty interesting coverage as we saw this year. And for the Bills, it's become the norm that we have to wait until late in the night on Thursday to get to the pick, usually, as was the case this year. They had the 30th overall in the first round. So, Kyle, I'll go to you first. I know we talked a little bit off air, but what was Thursday night kind of like for you viewing the draft and the Bills pick?
Yeah, well, leading up to it, I didn't even think they would make that pick, considering Brandon Beane usually trades back in the first round, and I believe it was like 4 or 5 years straight where they didn't make a pick in the first round, including last year, of course, when they just passed on Xavier Worthy, as we talked off the air. But yeah, I do think they got a good player in Maxwell Hairston. They needed to address the defense. Their first 5 picks of the night were on defense, or not of the night, but of the weekend. It's the first time since 2006 that the Bills have drafted 5 straight defensive players. So, I think they just wrote the word defense on the board, and they kind of just attacked that. And as we see every year with the Bills, or at least the last few years, the offense really isn't the issue with this team. And so I think they just want to stack up on the defensive players and get really heavy on that side of the ball to hopefully finally get over that hump in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're also, looking at depth on the defensive end, because can't think of many teams that have been dealing with injuries past couple of years of contending teams than the Bills, and so they want to load up. And as you said, Kyle, offense hasn't been the problem, although there are places they could improve. Yep. On offense, but last year as we got into the playoffs and late in the season, they couldn't play man coverage because of the injuries to their cornerbacks. They couldn't stop the run at times. They couldn't get to the quarterback in key situations. So if you're looking at offense versus defense, I'm not surprised they went defense.
And their defensive line, which they totally revamped, they ranked 23rd in sack rate. Third down defense, they ranked 29th. So, yeah, they just completely just overhauled the defensive line, and I think it was smart. I mean, you still got a couple of the guys that will be returning, but they needed to make the moves, and they did it, and they did it on the cheaper end, too. You can't just go out and get a bunch of free agents to fix that side of the ball. It's going to be very expensive. So, overall, I like the draft. Of course, you're going to get more into it and explain every player, but I think it was good.
Yeah, let's get into the first guy here. Obviously, round 1, pick 30, Maxwell Harrison, cornerback out of Kentucky. DB cornerback ends up being, depending upon what analysts you look like at the national level, kind of the Bills' main focus for the draft. You might have seen Harrison a lot during the draft. He was kind of the last guy in the green room, kind of celebrating the draft picks as they went out. I'm pretty sure he dabbed up pretty much everybody who went through on night 1 before he got taken. So obviously, to me, there's a bit of a nice little character building element there. But take a look at it like this. A 4.28 40-yard dash was the fastest this year at the NFL Combine. That's something that Brandon Beane even emphasized with the pick overall. 21 years old. Kind of looking like a potential starter, maybe not for the Bills, but at the very least, kind of a player that will for sure have some sort of significant playing time.
He'll probably be a starter once Tre'Davious White gets hurt.
Well, that was something that kind of people maybe brought up initially anyway with that. So pretty interesting, though. This is the second year in a row that the Bills did go to the Lexington, Kentucky well for the Wildcats. Obviously, running back Ray Davis, last year rookie out of Kentucky. So back-to-back years that the Bills went to that SEC school, and first-round pick of Maxwell Harrison this year.
Yeah, some of the reviews I've gotten on him is, I guess, size is a little bit of an issue. But although he's already gained 11 pounds since the combine, so he's been trying to put on weight. But of course, the scouts are talking, but we know they can be wrong. That he'll get bullied around the field unless he gains weight and more weight.
Yeah.
And height wise, I think he's 5'11".
A lot of cornerbacks are 5'11" in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, just for example, a lot of scouts said Patrick Mahomes wasn't going to be, so you see there, I mean, I don't really listen to the scouts. You just don't know what's going to happen.
The thing I hate most about the NFL draft is every time a player gets picked, whether it's the last pick in the 6th round or the second pick of the draft, they're always talking about how special these players are and how great they are. When 75% of them probably aren't going to be in the league in 2 years or 3 years, and a lot of these guys are going to end up on practice squads. But when you watch the coverage, they're all showing the highlights of their best plays at their college career, and they just go on and on about how great they are. So it's always a wait and see thing. But I was glad to see them go cornerback. Obviously, like I said, they are shell-shocked from injuries, especially at the cornerback position, and you can't have enough depth on defense, I think, especially defensive secondary. So I like the pick, and of course, picking at the end of the first round, they didn't have tons of options. And it gets to a point there where you say, if you got like the 3rd or 4th pick of the draft, you can make a big mistake, I think. It's tough to make big mistakes at 30.
Yeah, I think at that point, late in the first round, it kind of becomes an element, too, of like, yeah, sure, you're going for potentially what you need, more than likely still, but also there's an element of who could be the best available at that point as well, as we kind of see. And look, we're going to hammer this head. We've already talked about it a ton, but the Bills really address a need here, right? We saw Penford go down a ton last year. Obviously, the defense as a whole kind of got to get dinged up. We'll look, when we get to the next pick, that's like Kyle mentioned, it's another defensive player. So, I mean, the Bills really went out. I think they addressed the need, and I think they also, at the same point, probably got one of the better guys available still at that time in the draft, no matter how you slice it.
I love, especially at cornerback, but anytime you can add speed to your defense, playmaker. And you got Tre'Davious White, Benford, and Harrison and Jackson. So I mean, I think it's safe to say that they're set right now. At cornerback heading into the 2025 season.
Yeah. Also, a thing that I enjoy looking at for a defender here, we kind of talked about my fandom anyway on the NFL side. I'm watching, but when I see somebody get described as Brandon Beane did with Hairston as a willing tackler, that's kind of one of the things I prefer seeing out of a defensive back, no matter what their true position at that spot may be, as we have that umbrella for cornerbacks and safeties and stuff like that. When I see something or a player being called a willing tackler, that tells me somebody who, it doesn't matter what his size is, he's going to get you down at some point. And that's a pretty big, to me, it's a big check on a player's scouting report and what you want out of a player at that position.
Yeah, probably nothing more annoying than seeing some of these NFL teams just arm tackle and miss tackles. Yeah. Of course, you'll see a lot of the bad teams do it, but yeah, I mean, you want guys that are going to be physical, and I think this guy is just that.
Yeah,
certainly seemed grateful for the pick.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the benefits of going later in the first round. If you're a guy that's hoping to maybe go mid-first round or even higher and you slip and go late, hey, you're probably going to a good team that's, got a chance to compete immediately, for in the playoffs and for a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So, I think the Bills Mafia's first introduction to Maxwell Hairston was positive. He's going to be a player that's, I think, well liked.
Yeah.
And we'll see where he lands on the roster. But your first round pick, always plays into the mix in the upcoming season one way or another, whether he's, one of the top two guys or not. But we'll see him on the field for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the Bills' second pick. They traded up for this pick. For the 41st overall in the second round. Went back to the SEC but just went down to Columbia, South Carolina for TJ Sanders, defensive tackle from the Gamecocks. Part of a very, what I would call, interesting defensive scheme in South Carolina this past year as a college football junkie. But this guy, he's going to factor in, as we know the Bills enjoy moving the defensive linemen through plays and through the downs on that side of the ball. This is going to be a very interesting spot for him, and it's also need spot potentially for the Bills here, as we know that they're moving on from Von Miller. It's going to be a nice little youth replacement anyway in that type of spot, but also a spot that we kind of saw not quite necessarily get dinged up through the year, but struggle to maybe every now and then kind of make their presence known. We saw the linebackers for the Bills this past year make a lot of pressure as opposed to the D line. This is a guy who, to me, I think can help solve a little bit of that pressure issue on the interior side.
And the first thing I see on the scouting report with him is he's physical with strong hands and gets off blocks and knocks down the quarterback. Well, I mean, if he lives up to that, that would be great, because that's what we talk about all the time in the playoffs. You need more of that.
Anytime your defensive line can pressure the quarterback, that leads to success for the entire defense. You don't have to send your linebackers, but they paid a lot for this guy. They could have had 2 second-round picks. There's lots of defensive linemen available in the second round, and they said this is our guy. So we're going to see, how that pans out. Mm-hmm. But they need with this pick, I kind of felt like they needed a defensive lineman that's going to immediately have an impact. Yeah. So I'd expect to see him in the lineup too on opening day.
Now, as I mentioned, part of an interesting defensive unit for South Carolina under head coach Shane Beamer. And if you know the Beamer family, it tends to be a defensive first kind of mindset. Had 8.5 sacks over the past couple seasons, 7.5 from the defensive tackle spot, which is the position he was drafted from. However, played pretty much everywhere around that defensive line in his career at South Carolina. So there is an element of versatility should there need to be. That being said, typically doesn't necessarily translate over to the NFL. Could we see something kind of different? Possibly. Brandon Beane even brought that up. He sees him as a 3-technique guy, could go to a 1-technique situation, but at the moment, kind of see him as the de facto backup for Ed Oliver on the defensive rotation side of things.
Yeah, and I know we haven't covered all the picks yet, but one thing about all these picks, it seems like a lot of these guys can do multiple different things well. It's not just one set thing, so they have versatility to do all these different things, and I think that's what you need on a winning team. Guys that are willing to move spots and do whatever if there's injuries.
Right.
Yeah. Let's with that in mind, Go to the third pick for the Bills that they had in round 3, pick 72, Landon Jackson, an edge from Arkansas. So kind of keeping on that theme, at least on the defensive line side of things. A guy that versatility has got to be your middle name if you're an edge guy, right? You got to be able to potentially drop back into coverage and then also pounce and be, that defensive tackle-esque deal right away. Obviously, for the Bills, the edge, kind of a spot where maybe not necessarily needs the exact place in mind, bringing in Joey Bosa in free agency, but that being said, Bosa's only on a 1-year deal, so
Bosa was injured half last year,
and that's part of it. So, kind of the main thing here, Brandon Bean brought up, character, DNA, and Kyle, like you said again here, athleticism. Right? So Landon Jackson, a guy who can kind of do a bunch of different things should they need to be, and just a high RPM type of player.
Not a lot
The
of
SEC.
speed. Not a lot of speed.
Well, that was kind of the interesting part with this, to a degree, is a part of an Arkansas team that beginning of last year, we thought their head coach, Sam Pittman, might be looking for new job opportunities. Ends up being part of a really good unit that kind of stepped up as the year went on. So, to me anyway, there's a possibility that I think he could be a high ceiling type guy. That being said, I don't know what we'll fully see here. 20 run stops in the last 2 years, tied for 5th in the SEC, which has become, the de facto premium stop here with college football when you talk about stuff like that and everything. But, I think it's a good spot for a 3rd-round pick, right? You don't necessarily expect maybe high impact right away, but he's going to come in, fill a role, and learn from one of the best that we've seen in recent memory in Joey Bosa at that edge spot. It's interesting we get to this point, and maybe we can also fill in here with that 4th-round pick that the Bills had, their 4th overall, on our defensive tackle, again going to Kentucky with Deani Walker. Kyle, I know you brought up the 2006 draft. The Bills went 3 straight defensive linemen, obviously, in these mid-rounds. We know that was...
2006?
Was it 2006
Yeah,
you said, Kyle?
19 years ago we're bringing up?
Well, no. Well, Kyle brought up how the first 5 picks for the Bills in that draft were all defensive side of the ball, and this was the first time since then that they did the same thing. But I don't know if you can dig deep. Have we ever seen 3 at the same position essentially be drafted by?
Yeah,
by
I'm not sure. I'm a stat guy, but I don't have that one. But yeah, I like this pick. The Bills have been raving about the pick because they said, I remember Brandon Bean saying that if there wasn't for an injury last year, he thinks he would have gone late in the 1st round. That's how high they are on this guy. So, of course, again, this guy provides the depth that they need to.
He's a giant.
Yeah.
It's like huge.
Yep.
6'7", 331 was his measurements. So they have him listed at DT. You kind of wonder with his size and everything else, do you think we could see him? Now, the Bills don't necessarily line up a bunch in this formation that allows for it, but to me, this almost gives the vibes of almost if they line up in a play set that allows for a nose tackle position almost, would he kind of be that de facto guy at that point? He's going to be essentially a backup anyway in this rotation at the moment, but, like you said, Kyle, this is a guy who, if it wasn't for an injury, we're probably talking at minimum, a second-day draft pick as opposed to a third-day draft pick.
Yeah.
So, also interesting to note here, at least with the Bills, obviously we mentioned going back to that Kentucky this is essentially equaling Kentucky's most picks in the common draft era ever, in addition to that, which is kind of crazy. I think a lot of people associate Kentucky with basketball, but they've had some pretty good football stuff throughout the years. And obviously the Bills kind of see something here anyway from that program that they kind of just go back to that well and don't have a problem taking a player clearly here. So for the 5th pick that the Bills had, number 170 overall, in our final of the 5 straight defensive players, Jordan Hancock, cornerback from Ohio State. side of the ball that to me kind of got maybe overlooked the past couple of years in the grand scheme of it at Ohio State, given the fact that they keep trying to take this wide receiver U mantra down there in Columbus. But either way, Hancock allows a lot of versatility. Kind of the name of the game that we've been talking about in this draft, has played in a couple different scheme sets in Columbus. And excuse me, for the Bills, can bring that as well. Also, a lot of experience, 42 games in college for the Buckeyes. So, a lot to see with there. At the moment, though, he'll probably fill an interesting spot for the Bills, special teams guy, which you don't normally necessarily see out of any draft pick right away, in the sense of like, this is his role, we're going to see how it goes. The Bills kind of outright kind of just said this is probably going to be a special teams guy, and who knows what might happen. But as we've seen, if you're a defensive back with the Bills, you're probably going to get some sort of playing time.
Yeah, I mean, now we're getting to the point where who knows what's going to happen with these guys. I do like that they took another defensive back. I do like kind of that they stayed with defense. But then, of course, they go to tight end in the 5th round as well. And I mean, what do they keep drafting these tight ends for?
Well, let me do some previewing here of the Jackson Haas pick here. So Georgia Tech tight end, 5th round, 169 overall. Look, he was at Yale for his undergrad, went to Georgia Tech for a graduate year. He did not have a blown block in 348 total pass plays for Georgia Tech. A pretty much, I wouldn't say true passing offense if you saw what they did, but I will tell you this. He gave me a headache as a Syracuse fan this past year in their game.
He got 16 passes all year.
Yep, but what this tells me is they were looking for a guy who, can go out and catch a ball, but gives you that added protection element, which, Kyle, you said to me off air, that's something that Brandon Bean, I keep calling him Billy Bean because I'm baseball mind right now. That Brandon Bean kind of wants to get done is have this be a better protection for Josh Allen. And look, I'm not trying to say that Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox just don't do a good enough job, but they're both pass first kind of tight ends at this point, as opposed to what Haas is, which is appearing to be a protection first tight end.
Yeah, and we talked about it a lot. We didn't understand really why, they gave Kincaid that extension, and then they I'm mixing up. They gave Knox the extension and then drafted Kincaid, and now they draft this tight end. This one makes more sense because this guy's like a blocking first tight end, and then you would pair that with like Kincaid. So maybe I don't know, I just don't see it, but is one of those guys going to be on the move? Is Dawson Knox possibly going to be?
I don't think Jackson Haas is good enough to send either of those guys packing. But
because a lot of people are high on this guy, keep seeing that he will get immediate playing time. He'll take an active jersey every Sunday. And again, I don't know why you would want both of the same tight end and Kincaid and Knox. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can only have one out there, and
that's a good point. And you can also look at the fact that neither one of them were really great last year.
And tight ends, I mean, you'll find a few, at the top of the chart, but then it gets thin around the league. There's got to be a team out there that would love to give, the Bills at least some picks for. I wouldn't trade Kincaid. I would focus on Knox. I think Kincaid has the better future ahead.
Well, to that end, right, you're going to go for the guy who you're going to probably be paying less more than likely in that spot anyway at the moment, and that would be Kincaid in that spot. Do apologize. We got a little bit of a lag going on right now with our remote control, so Kyle, you're kind of stuck up there at the screen at the moment. So either way, there we go.
Obviously, a trade wouldn't happen right now because, of course, we haven't even seen this guy take the field. But I'm just saying, Dawson Knox is on that extension. He's still locked up, I think, for 2 more years after this.
Yes.
So maybe in the future, we could see a trade for one of the tight ends.
Yeah, maybe they in the 5th round again. Maybe they like something about this Jackson Haas, and they're going to see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out after a year or two, then people forget they ever drafted him.
Yeah. True.
But when you get to these late round picks, and we've obviously got they got 3 more players they drafted. Just want to go back to last year's draft, right? which was kind of the opposite of this year's draft in a lot of ways. Like the first round pick was a wide receiver. The Bills obviously still, as we talk now, have not filled that number one wide receiver type of player. They went with Amani Cooper last year. They sent Diggs packing. They drafted Coleman. They've proven, I think, that they can win to a point without, but again, they passed on Xavier Worthy last year, and he ended up being the difference maker for the Chiefs. And we got Keon Coleman, who disappointed, I'd say, in his first year as a first-round pick. You could argue that the fourth-round pick of Ray Davis may have had more of a positive impact. But then, so they drafted Coleman, Bishop, Dwayne Carter, who didn't have much of an impact in the third round, and then Ray Davis with the fourth. And then after that, you don't even know, none of these guys, if I read them off, you would even remember them or who they are. They, didn't do anything with the team. I think Daquan Hardy might have been on special teams maybe. He was a cornerback, the sixth-round pick last year. So just, want to point out, everybody watches the draft, and you get to the later rounds, and like, oh, we got this guy, we got that guy. These guys probably are not ever going to see the field.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, look.
With a rare exception.
Yeah. No, I was about to say, and you never know, right? So I for this year's draft, I'm just going to rattle them off quickly. Round 6, pick 177, Dorian Strong from Virginia Tech, cornerback. Round 6, 206, Chase Lunt, offensive tackle from UConn. And then the final pick for the Bills, round 7, 240 overall, Caden Prather, wide receiver from Maryland. And look, you could probably even make the case, frankly, even in the Haas space for sure, that we were saying that, you're kind of competing for the roster spot to a degree. And you're addressing your needs of defensive back and wideout. And, you can never have too many offensive linemen competing in the space, as I call it. So, you're just looking for stuff there that, who fits your needs, who's best available, and that can go out and compete for one of those at worst 10 practice slots, 53-man active roster at the end. Like who knows, right? And like you said, Jim, it's frankly a crapshoot. I mean, how many? I can't even really think off the top of my head exactly. How many of these late round picks even make, like you said, all that big of a difference most of the time outside
of the exception of Tom Brady.
Yeah, outside of being like depth pieces at the end of the day, right? There's not really overall a ton. Like we said, there are exceptions to the rule. Like, don't get us wrong, but in a lot of these spots, right, you're addressing team need, scheme, but also you're probably not expecting a whole ton in this scenario. And
if one of them works out, great. But yeah. I just, the draft drags on that final day, and a lot of these guys get picked, and it's just so that made me go back to just look at who the Bills drafted in the late rounds last year, and there are a bunch of guys that had zero impact.
Yeah.
And aren't even, going to have an impact this year, aren't even with the organization anymore.
Yeah. So who knows? All right. So moving on here quickly before we wrap up, obviously now focus for the Bills, and I guess every other NFL team, to be fair, goes to spring camps, OTAs, rookie camps, all that type of stuff. At this point, what can we expect from the Bills? Normally at this point in the offseason, it's kind of quiet in terms of overall roster movement. Yeah, there's going to be signings and stuff like that. Typically, though, it's...
get a wide receiver? Can they go into the season with this core?
And that's what I was about to kind of ask, is because we, at this point, like I said, you normally don't see any free agent signings because it's, the main guys for the most part have typically already signed and we're already moved on from that point. But do we see at this point the Bills go out and see what we did, or see what they did with the attempt of Amari Cooper being that guy that you go out and get via trade? Do we see that, though, perhaps better executed heading into some of the spring ball stuff?
I don't see a huge move. I'm not saying they shouldn't make a big move at receiver, although they are bringing in Elijah Moore for a visit this morning. He's their veteran guy. Had a career high in catches with Cleveland. Was all over the field, as you probably guys know. You watch a lot of the games. So I think that's probably all they'll do for now if they do decide. Amari Cooper is still out there. I know he didn't have a huge impact in the offense in terms of production-wise, but was still out there blocking, and that's still a big part of the game. But yeah, we talked about this last training camp.
Curtis Samuel, remember
Yeah.
they brought him in last year?
Yeah, we thought last summer or when we were talking that this receiver group looked weak, but yet they went 8 straight games with 30 or more points. They led the league in scoring. They scored more points than the Eagles, who were the Super Bowl champs.
They had explosive offensive games, but when it came down to it, in the biggest games in the playoffs,
Matt Collins was there, and now he's not.
yeah,
Remember, he was their
well,
biggest player.
it seemed like, it seemed like a lack of fight. You were just basically relying on Josh. If James Cook wasn't having a good day on the ground, you were relying on Josh Allen to just somehow pull out these games, and he didn't have the tools. You took away one of his biggest tools in Stephon Diggs, who I was glad to see him go, though fine, but you didn't replace him with anybody. Amari Cooper wasn't that guy. Curtis Samuel was kind of a silly thing.
He's got to be better.
Yeah,
That contract, that 3 years, $27 million? I think it was, or maybe I'm a little off on the money. But
whatever it was, if it was $100, it was too much, from what he showed last year. And then Keon Coleman was a disappointment. Now, can Keon Coleman step up in his sophomore year? You see that a lot. Can he be better? Maybe. Maybe the Bills will go with a 3 tight end set now that they drafted Jackson Hawes.
Well, they got the explosive Josh Palmer in free agency.
It's true. They did get Palmer, which is another guy. I like him better than Curtis Samuel, but he's not the type of guy that you're like, wow.
Yeah, he's not. He's never really got even anywhere where his ceiling probably should be.
But apparently his film's off the charts if you look at some of these scouts.
Yeah, so what?
It's open, they say.
Yeah.
That's why the Chargers traded him.
Yeah, I'll read off the wide receiver room here quickly. So we got Coleman, Palmer, mentioned Prather, who they drafted, obviously. Obviously, Khalil Shakir's still there. And then you got guys that they brought in like Chenault Jr., Laviska Chenault, who hasn't been frankly relevant since his rookie year with Jacksonville. Hal Presley, Terrell Shavers, and KJ Hamler. So
maybe the worst wide receiver group in the NFL. Do you think?
Apologies, I forgot Jalen Virgil. So.
But do you think that is the worst wide receiver group in the NFL?
Brandon Beane was on the radio this morning, and he was ripping people that were complaining about the wide receiver room. He said this. He brought up the points. He said, as long as we're blocking, protecting Allen, and putting points on the board, I don't care what our receiver names look like.
That is a point.
He said, that's what we did last year. He said, that's why my focus going into the draft this year.
And you didn't get to the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah, I know, but he said, that's why I fixed the problem, the defense, which is what's been stopping us.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
And he kept saying, this isn't fantasy football. And nobody's saying this is fantasy football.
No, but guess what? It wasn't fantasy football when Xavier Worthy was streaking down the sideline, for an 80-yard touchdown pass, from Patrick Mahomes. It's not fantasy football when you see, there was Nico Collins in Houston or, all these great NFL receivers. And you just have to say, man, if Josh Allen had a guy like Nico Collins or a guy like Terry McLaurin, anybody, right?
No, and that's what I was going to say is you look at all the teams, frankly, outside of Buffalo, who are what we'll just at this point call consistently in the playoffs, right? Sure, I get what Bean is saying, but each team has a guy, right? The guy that they can turn to, ball in the air and get it.
And then he's kind of turned out to not be that guy for whatever reason. Maybe just getting old, maybe just because he's a prima donna, and they let him go, and then now there's been nothing. Remember when he came over from Minnesota, everybody's like, wow, finally, and it worked for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And they never replaced him.
Yeah.
They got rid of him without a plan to replace him, and if the plan was Keon Coleman, it was a bad plan. Yeah. And, if the plan was Amari Cooper or another aging veteran, probably not a good plan. And it's frustrating, like I said, when you look at the great rookie wide receivers last year. The Bills got Keon Coleman. Now, granted, they had a late draft pick, I guess, and everything, but to me, if you're assuming other than depth, obviously the Bills need depth. Any NFL team needs depth. But other than that, what could they have done in this draft to maybe elevate the team, it would be to try to get a couple high upside wide receivers maybe, and they didn't. And they don't have a plan for one.
Yeah, he also said you can look around the league and find better receiver cores than we have, but he said the problem with those other teams is they don't have the pass protection we have or the running game we have, which is why we scored more points than them. That's how he put it.
Look, I can't necessarily argue in that, but that doesn't mean that you can't upgrade your wide receivers.
Yeah.
You could say, well, we're going to punt on wide receiver because we have good pass protection.
Yeah.
And literally 20 minutes after that radio appearance this morning in Buffalo, it was announced that Elijah Moore was coming in for a visit. So that was the
Moore
funny part.
could be a guy. He could be a guy. He did great in Cleveland
25 years
last
old.
year. Yeah, with nothing really. With a horrible quarterback.
But to that end, right, this would be his third team in a pretty short time frame.
But maybe his first team with a good quarterback.
Fair. Yeah. No.
Kind of like Mac Hollins came over. I mean, he wasn't a big name, and he probably didn't have the best quarterbacks early on in his career. He played with Josh Allen, and he caught that big touchdown against the Chiefs in the playoffs.
I know, but so why do they let Mac Hollins go, but hold on to Curtis Samuel?
Well, I think
money.
that's a contract thing. I think Mac was only a 1-year contract, and Samuel was it a 2+ an option?
Yeah.
Or was it an outright 3?
I think it was an outright
Tough
3.
to move now,
And
bro.
Mac signed a 2-year 8.4.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha. So,
yeah.
I mean, hey, look, I like Elijah Moore. I had him not to go the fantasy route. I had him in fantasy a couple years ago, and it worked out well. That being said, I understand maybe the hope, but like I don't think Elijah Moore is that guy either to be a number one. I could be wrong, but like I don't know if I see it. Like that's my issue with it.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, one thing to say while we bash on these Bills wide receivers is Shakir is the standout.
Yeah.
And he kind of faded at the end of the year last year too. He had an injury.
Ankle.
So hopefully if he's back 100%, but he's the lone bright spot. He's the Puka Nacua of the Bills. So we talked a lot about wide receivers. We didn't mention Shakir.
Yeah.
He's the best one, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah.
Yards after catch guy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, hey, who knows? I mean, I do know of one wide receiver out there, but I know he's not a fit for this team. I don't think he's a fit for many teams. So,
Randy Moss.
no, I think Kyle knows exactly who I'm thinking.
Oh, I'm trying to think.
Oh, he's an AFC guy.
George Pickens.
Yep.
Oh, that head case.
Nope. I would not go near that.
100% be screaming at Josh Allen on the first game.
Yeah. I wouldn't be going near that. So, but who knows? We've seen crazier stuff happen, but I wouldn't be doing that. I know that much. I wouldn't be doing it.
And then for a backup quarterback, what do you think about bringing in Rodgers to Buffalo?
No.
It's a joke.
No.
I thought that the Bills might take a leap on a backup quarterback possibility at some point in this draft. Just, it's a situation where you got Josh Allen, so you can bring a guy in who's, maybe could fill that backup quarterback role in case anything happened. God forbid.
Yeah. I mean, I know Mitch is still there. I think Mike White is still there, and then I think I always butcher his last name. Is it Steve Bushel?
Oh, the old guy from KC.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still on the roster.
I secretly wanted Kyle McCord.
I was about to say I knew exactly what route you were going
He
down.
landed
Jim.
in Philly.
Yeah, but I knew exactly as soon as you said it because of the fact that Philly drafted McCord. I knew exactly what route you were going down. So, I mean, hey, look, I don't think you're wrong. I think if there was a draft to do it, it was probably going to be this draft. It wasn't a great. Let me rephrase, because I think this is a common misconception happening at the moment based on what forcibly became one of the main storylines from this draft. This wasn't a draft where a lot of teams were looking at quarterback, and that's a pretty rare thing to kind of say out loud. And so it just ends up being that you have guys who, frankly, probably weren't all that necessarily great prospects at that position anyway. Could have been Could have been a draft to do exactly what you were saying, Jim. I don't know if McCord necessarily, to be fair, I don't know if McCord necessarily fits the Eagles scheme exactly either, but yeah, maybe, I don't know. I don't know exactly a good fit from quarterback for this draft to fit the Bills system potentially, but hey, I don't hate the logic behind it. I'll put it to you that way.
Well, it didn't happen.
What about Keenan Allen? I just look at the wide receiver free agent.
Is he still out there?
Keenan Allen, Mari Cooper, and then Elijah Moore, Tyler Boyd, Nelson Aguilar.
I think Allen could be a guy. Keenan Allen, how old is he? He's got to be 32, 33, 34.
He might be younger than that.
33.
Oh, he is?
33?
Wow.
He's older than Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, because they show his name right under
Yeah,
it.
and he was never a speedster. He was a possession type receiver.
He jumps up and gets it.
Yeah,
Mike Evans type, yeah.
Coleman's your speedster, right?
In theory.
And so then you get Keenan Allen and Shakur. I mean, I like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, just because they're bringing him.
I don't hate it. I know that much. I don't
They're
hate
going to
it.
sign Elijah Moore. They just brought him in for a visit, so maybe they'll bring him in for a visit too.
Okay. There's guys out there. There are guys available. And at the end of the day, I think the hope would be to bring at least a couple more bodies in to compete at that position room. I know that much.
And remember where Keenan Allen played last year, Chicago, and we all know how that quarterback went.
Yeah.
Well,
Look at those numbers that he put up.
you have to
Overthrew every time he threw to him.
Yeah, no, I think Keenan
Caleb
Allen could get a
Williams.
resurgence if
Yeah.
he was in a place like Buffalo for he's got a couple more good years left in him.
Yeah.
But anyways, week 1 predictions.
Oh yeah. Who are the Bills even playing week 1? I forgot.
To be honest, I really don't know.
Yeah.
We're off for a while now.
Yeah, we're off until,
Late August.
barring like super duper breaking news of some sort of pretty big magnitude. I think
They get the Jets.
sweet
wow.
Bills by 50.
It's not how it historically plays out.
Well,
And remember, the schedule will come out May 14th.
yeah, that's right. I forgot about that portion of the draft Thursday night.
One final thing I'll say just about the NFL draft, it's such a spectacle. I mean, they really play it up and everything, but it's overdone in my opinion. I don't mind. I watch it on night 1, and then the rest of the time I just track it by on my phone, see who's been getting picked and stuff. But who are these people that put on the makeup and dress up and go to Green Bay for the draft and then sit there for hours until their team picks and then go crazy. They don't even know who the guy is that got picked, and I don't understand.
I'm happy that I'm not alone on this front, where I've never understood, frankly, going to, as a fan anyway, going to the draft. You're sitting around waiting to watch a person be picked, and you're paying out how much to go.
I mean, the NBA draft is even better because it's faster.
Yeah.
But the NFL draft,
Well, it's bad when your own commissioner, Roger Goodell, even comes out and says, like, we need to shorten up night 1. Like, we need to shorten it up. Like, it's bad. It's bad. I thought you were, frankly, Jim, going down the, I'll say it, the Shedeur Sanders path here, and I'm just like, oh boy. But
that's I wasn't unhappy to see that happen to him.
no, but I was talking about the
Frank call.
well, if you're watching the ESPN coverage, the Mel Kiper show of, frankly, I'm surprised Mel's head did not explode at some point.
Well, you know what, Mel, you're probably wrong. You think that the 30 NFL teams could be wrong, or you think you're wrong?
Who's the one? I forgot who it was.
More pumpkin pie for breakfast.
Yeah.
That called the NFL GMs racist because no one was taking.
Oh, I saw.
It's the most dumbest thing I've ever.
Well, I saw. Was it Stephen A? Was this like, this is like Colin Kaepernick levels of like blackballing potentially happening? I'm like, what is like
Or
going?
Ryan Clark running his mouth. Ryan Clark has gotten bad.
Yeah,
Everything's racism with him.
look. No, like I've said on here, I love college football. I watch a lot of it, more so than for sure I know you guys in that sense. I'm not going to sit here and act like Shedeur's bad. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but I don't think he was great. There was a lot of issues I had with him, honestly, mechanically speaking. And I go back to something I said a little bit ago when we were talking about why didn't the Bills hypothetically draft a backup quarterback. This just wasn't a really good quarterback class anyway, and it wasn't like there was a lot of teams that needed a quarterback in the first place. And I'm sorry, I lean into this theory as well. That's just the hype just was not what was being delivered. I mean,
time when they thought he would go third.
Yeah. I mean,
third day.
Yeah.
More like it.
Yeah. So, look, I feel bad in essence of like the prank call kind of to a degree here. Like I the fact that a coach left his iPad out and his kid found it and was calling people.
Another Jets guy, even though he's with the Falcons now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't feel. I mean, what I heard was, he went in for these interviews and he was a jerk.
Yeah.
Like he was cocky.
Yeah.
And the players these coaches are probably watching the tape and like, okay, he's okay. Maybe we could develop him, and he's got some upside. And then they meet him and interview him, and they're like, I don't want this guy anywhere near my locker room. You know whose fault that is? It's Dion's fault. His dad.
And I was going to circle back to this. This was a player who, and let's take the name out of this, right? Take the Sanders element out of this. If it was any other player that we were told did not do well like that in interviews, excuse me, did not throw at his own pro day, did not throw at the combine, interviewed poorly, and also, by the way, at the combine, which he went to anyway, even though he didn't do anything, had a press conference where he said, don't draft me if I'm not going to fit your system or anything like that.
And he throws screen passes.
Yeah, I mean,
at Colorado.
Why would you draft that guy?
I wouldn't.
Right? Like, so that's my thing with it. That's what I mean by, like, I just don't think this hype matches up with what he is, and I don't think the headache that comes along with it is worth it at the end of the day. So, hey, part of it, we'll see.
Nothing to do with the Bills, but
yeah, no, but frankly, to a degree, it might as well. It ended up becoming the main headline from this draft when it frankly shouldn't have been. I mean, I know we're a Bills podcast, but you want to know who I feel bad for in a lot of this? Cam Ward gets drafted first overall. You want to know what was talked about right away? The fact that it wasn't Shedeur Sanders. And that's just crap.
Good for Cam Ward to fly under the radar. I mean, there's a reason why he went first and Shedeur Sanders went on the third day.
Yeah. So, Kyle, I know you're a big college football junkie clearly here. So,
no, I really don't know much. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah. So, I know a lot of this is a little bit foreign probably to you a little bit, but buckle up for the potential Deion Sanders show returning to the NFL.
Get to know them all when they get to the NFL.
Yeah. So,
college football is just another version of professional football now, anyways.
Yeah, I know. We officially, for the Syracuse fans out here, we officially know where Trevor Pena is heading. So
unbelievable.
So
Penn State, if you're wondering.
Yeah, either way, just great stuff. So let's get out of there on that note and look forward to a good spring and summer for the Bills as we ramp up for another fall of football over at Orchard Park.
August.
Yeah, so like I said, barring anything like magnitude extreme happening, we'll be back in August for some preview stuff and gearing up for the 2025 Buffalo Bills season at that point. So, gentlemen, great.
Before we go, early prediction on the Bills.
Okay.
Where's the season going to end in terms of, Super Bowl, miss the playoffs? Like, if you had to say it right now, personally, I'll go first since I put you guys on the spot. I think that they're taking a step back. I mean, they exceeded last year's expectations, but they still couldn't get it done, and they were further away from getting it done than they were 2 or 3 years ago. And I just don't see anything so far that's going to make them any better next year, while I do see other teams in the AFC specifically have gotten better.
Really?
Even Kansas City, who looked like they were starting to fade away, sure, they might lose Travis Kelce, but they've reloaded, with guys like Xavier Worthy and, Rashee Rice will be back next year, and the defense was obviously strong. The Bengals should be better this year. You know, you can go up and down the AFC, and the Bills have seemed to kind of stand pat, not address major areas of concern, and they'll be competitive and probably win the AFC East. But when it gets right down to it, have they elevated, done anything so far to elevate to the Super Bowl champion level? And I just don't think so. I think it's going to be all on Josh Allen again.
Yeah, you have good points. But then again, I think last year when we said the same thing about, you know, the receiver room, how it didn't look great, and then they get to the championship game. But yeah, just the way the trend has gone too the last few years, every time they take a step forward and get closer and closer, they take one little step back.
Yeah.
So I'll go by history. They get knocked out in the divisional round.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like maybe
They've had
championship, but I just don't. But again, that's why they play the game. And, you know, we went into some of these games, playoff games this year, thinking, you know, yeah, the Bills can do it. They can do it. They're going to do it. And then they don't. And so I don't know. It's frustrating to see Kansas City, you know, do it again when we think that they were kind of like phasing out, and maybe teams like the Bills are phasing in. And it's still the Chiefs again, and I don't know. Hopefully the Bills stay really healthier this year, and they're going to be in it, right? They're going to win the AFC East most likely, and they're going to be in it. And then, so to me, what are they going to do against, you know, the Texans are going to be better, is for example.
Chargers were there, but then they got the playoffs and fell apart.
Yeah, the Chargers should be good this year.
Forget about the Steelers, who are going to be elite when Rodgers signs.
So
Steelers haven't won a playoff game, remember, since 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking about the Steelers when I was talking about the AFC, but anyways, just a random thought as we head into the summer where we're not going to be thinking about football for a while. You know, I don't know how I feel about the Bills. I kind of feel like they're the same. Like they're going to be good enough to be fun to watch and have an awesome season, but I don't see that Super Bowl caliber team.
Well, I kind of zig, I think, on your zag, Jim. I don't think the FC overall has really improved in my mind, if I'm being totally honest. I don't necessarily view it that way. So, unfortunately, I'm going to take a page, but I kind of feel like with the AFC Days of Yore featuring a team, but I say AFC Championship game for the Bills, and until I'm proven otherwise, I just don't think they get beyond that hump.
Yeah, no, I think that's a real possibility, but that's their ceiling.
Yeah.
They're not a Super Bowl championship team, and I don't know what's going to. Maybe it's just fatigue.
Yeah.
Bills fatigue.
Yeah.
They've had the chance to get there the past several years and haven't been able to do it.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. We don't even know what, like we say, we'll be back in a few months here, and we don't know what's even going to happen between now and then. We don't know, unfortunately, who might get hurt during camps and stuff like that, and for not just the Bills, but any other team that might affect, you know, how the outlook looks the rest of the way for the NFL as a whole. So we're in the wait-and-see period for football until we get more information on that docket to do full-fledged predictions. But, guys, great chatting. We now get to focus on summer stuff as opposed to football again. So,
Yep, have a great summer, everybody.
All right, so appreciate everybody for listening in and tuning in here on Bills Weekly for this draft recap. You can find us here on YouTube, fingerlakes1.com, Spotify, and other major podcasting platforms. Like we said, back again in August. Let's go, Buffalo.